Welcome to the 700 Club. Phase 2 of the oil crisis. I just was reading what the long-range goals of the Saudis are. They want to break the oil industry in Nigeria. They want to break it in Russia. They want to break it in Iraq. They want to break it in other countries, especially the United States is producing oil. And they have a plan to do it. As phase 2 is going to be devastating as they go out with the enormous amount of money they have and take over the world. But in addition to that, there are about 50 million barrels of oil on the ocean right now coming to America to be processed in our refineries because the Saudis are taking over some of them too. This is a shocking story, and we'll be telling you more about it on this program. Well, let's make the economy great again. That's President Trump's goal, to get Americans back to work. And the sooner the better, as jobless claims keep rising, up another 4.4 million today. But what if there's a second wave of the virus? You know, the doctor who is quoted for that, he was on there yesterday saying, I didn't really mean that. What I meant was, if we have influenza and there's the COVID comes along, it'll be worse than it could have been without the influenza, and I recommend everybody take influenza shots. He was misquoted, but that's part of the game. Heather Sells had the story.
Many Americans are not just worried about the virus right now, but what might happen this winter. The president is downplaying that concern and pushing back against what the CDC director said earlier this week. Robert Redfield told the Washington Post there's a possibility that the assault of the virus on our nation next winter will actually be even more difficult than the one we just went through. But Wednesday night, during the coronavirus task force briefing, he clarified his remarks.
I didn't say that this was going to be worse. I said it was going to be more complicated or more difficult and potentially complicated.
Redfield said the potential twin challenge of dealing with both the coronavirus and the flu could be tough and urged Americans to get their flu shots in the fall. The president is also pushing back against the governor of Georgia. On Friday, Governor Kemp will allow some businesses like bowling alleys and hair salons to open.
This is a measured approach with a lot of different requirements and guidance that we're going to be putting out.
I told the governor very simply that I disagree with his decision, but he has to do what he thinks is right.
Critics have questioned the governor's decision because Georgia is still moving slowly with tracking and testing for the virus. In California, a small step toward reopening, Governor Newsom says he will allow elective surgeries in hospitals, letting thousands of healthcare employees go back to work. He's also ordering a statewide investigation to figure out when the epidemic actually started. A new report from Santa Clara shows that 2 people with the virus died up to 3 weeks before the U.S. reported its first death from the disease.
We've actually directed beyond just Santa Clara, go back as far as December, to request coroner's autopsy to dig even deeper.
In Washington, the House is set to pass an almost $500 billion relief bill today, aimed mainly at helping small businesses. The real fight now centers on the next bill and how much aid state and local governments will get. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says there will be a lengthy debate on that package, while Democrats and many governors say they need the help.
It's yet another unknown on the horizon right now, how much the federal government is willing to spend to bail out the country, along with questions about the continued spread of the virus and how long it will take to reopen the economy. Heather Sells, CBN News.
As I've said before, you know, how are we going to go out to the bowling alley? How are we going to go out to a gym? How are we going to go to a movie? You know, if the guy next to you has got this stuff, we don't know. It's going to be really a long time before we totally are comfortable getting this economy back moving, and we hope it certainly will be. Well, as I mentioned at the head of this program, phase 2 of this oil crisis has been engineered, from what we gather, by the Saudis. And it's now before us. What does it mean? What is this Saudi assault on our industry? But it's not just us. As I said at the head of the show, they are targeting a number of countries. And one of the countries is Nicaragua, which produces what is a heavy crude, which is called Oriente. And they're going to try to shut Nicaragua down. The whole country will collapse if they don't have any oil revenue. John Jessup has more on that story from Washington. Here's John.
Thanks, Pat. The threat coming from Saudi Arabia has some people in the U.S. industry say the Saudis are trying to knock out American domestic oil production for good. Dale Hurd has the story.
With oil prices sitting at their lowest level in 20 years, America's domestic oil industry is imploding as producers from Texas to North Dakota are being forced to shut down wells and lay off workers. It has some asking if this could be the end of the U.S. shale oil revolution.
We've already had about a 20,000 job loss from March of this year to March of 2019.
There's so little demand for oil, America has almost run out of places to store it. But the bad news for our domestic industry doesn't stop there. Now a fleet of Saudi tankers is on its way to the U.S. with even more oil that some say the U.S. doesn't need, threatening to make a bad situation even worse. 40 million barrels on 20 supertankers headed toward the Saudi-owned Motiva refinery on the Texas Gulf Coast. West Texas oilman Kirk Edwards calls the approaching Saudi tankers a type of Pearl Harbor event.
It's a little bit different because we know the ships are coming.
Edwards accuses the Saudis of trying to kill the American oil industry through oversupply and says the White House needs to act. He wants President Trump to immediately place a $40 per barrel tariff on Saudi oil coming into the United States.
They need to make a decision to save the domestic energy industry, or do we go back to being on foreign and imported oil into this country?
President Trump tweeted Tuesday, "We will never let the great U.S. oil and gas industry down, but it may already be too late."
I hate to be a pessimist about this, but I'm not sure that government action can be fast enough or large enough to give a lot of confidence to the market in the near term.
So every drilling rig that you see working right now will stop. We had 800 rigs working in this country at the start of the year. I can't imagine us having 50 working at the end of the year, and those rigs will only be drilling for natural gas, probably up in Ohio somewhere.
One study showed oil needs to cost $47 per barrel in order for drillers in the Permian Basin to just break even. It may not see that price for a long time, which means America's era of energy independence may be drawing to a close. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. Pat, how should the U.S. government respond?
Well, I think the idea of putting a tariff on Saudi crude is not a bad idea, but the truth is, it isn't just America. The phase two, I read yesterday a monograph that had been put out about phase two of this oil war. The Saudis are using their enormous amount of money and their enormous amount of crude to undercut the Russian production. You see, the Russians can only drill during cold weather when the permafrost is hard. The rest of the year, they can't do it. Now, if they have to shut their rigs down because of the oversupply, they can't restart them again because of the weather conditions in Siberia. And if that's the case, it'll be 10 to 15 years before they can get back. Now the Saudis are going after Nigeria, which has what's called body light. It's a light type of crude. It's one of the best. But there's so much political problem in Nigeria, they're going to exploit that. And then they're looking at Iraq, where there's been so much problem with war and various factions. They're going after the Iraqi production. And of course, the United States is just one of the targets in their sights. But phase two of this is going to be devastating. And they're talking about Nicaragua. It would literally wipe the Nicaraguan government off the map if they cannot get any money from their oil, which is, you had one of the biggest deposits, but it's that, it's the heavy crude, and they call it Oriente. And so this is a major war that's going on. And how do we respond to it? Well, the truth is our domestic oil now, we cannot produce anymore, so they're shutting these rigs down. But the Saudis literally are buying up a large number of of our filling stations and our production and our refineries here in America. So they're bringing all this crude into America and flooding us. It's a deliberate attempt by, it looks like Salman bin Salman. It's an insidious thing that they're doing, but nevertheless, we're in for it. This is just one of the trials that's going to be facing the President of the United States. You say, what do you do? How do you handle that? Well, a major industry is collapsing because of oversupply. How do you handle it? Well, you can't wave a magic wand. It's going to be tough, but we'll get through it if we recognize who the enemies are. John?
Pat, tensions between the United States and Iran are simmering again after Iran's space launch that could advance its long-range missile program. And President Trump has ordered the Navy to shoot down and destroy any Iranian gunboats that harass Navy ships.
So if they do that, that's putting our ships at danger and our great crews and sailors in danger. I'm not going to let that happen. And we will. They'll shoot them out of the water.
The president's order came after the Navy reported last week that 11 Iranian naval gunboats had carried out, quote, dangerous and harassing approaches to Navy and Coast Guard ships. Well, here in Washington, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says the coronavirus outbreak won't prevent the Senate from moving ahead with confirming President Trump's judicial nominees when senators come back to the nation's capital early next month. McConnell told radio talk show host Hugh Hewitt, quote, my motto for the year is leave no vacancy behind. That hasn't changed. The pandemic will not prevent us from achieving that goal. And Pat, as you know, confirming federal judges has long been a priority for both McConnell and President Trump.
Well, if you know, ladies and gentlemen, the social fabric of America has been rocked by the left-wing judges who have ruled against you all the way up and down. They ruled against Bible study. They ruled against religious exercises. They ruled against all sorts of religious things. And they have decimated our moral fiber. They ruled, for example, that abortion is a constitutional right, Roe versus Wade. And you go down the list. And so to change the federal judiciary is a huge step. And we're talking about circuit court judges, a number of them, but we're also, these district court judges are where so much of the law is made. And then you've got the appellate courts, and then there's some other ancillary courts that are being taken care of, too. But I congratulate Mitch McConnell. I like it. Leave no judge behind. It's a great slogan, but the president is on track. Jimmy Carter apparently had more appointments than anybody so far, but the president is coming close, and before he's finished, he can, I mean, and those people are in for life, too. If you put in a 40-year-old judge, he's going to be in for the next 30, 40 years. Big deal.
Big deal.
Okay.
Very big deal.
All right.